With David Margolick of the New York Times. Here's Michelle on the toll-free now from British Columbia. Hello.
Hi, T.S. I wanted to say I think you're keen, and
Thanks.
I'd like to ask your guest there how he thinks the jurors are being treated in all this.
Well, I think that, the jurors are probably being treated as well as anybody who's been cooped up for 100 days can possibly be treated. They're staying in a nice hotel.
Probably get 3 very nice meals a day.
Yeah, and they have a very solicitous judge who wants very much for them to like him. And I think that they're probably being treated all right. Now, they had their friction with the sheriff's deputies, at least some of them did, and the judge changed the deputies, which generated that whole protest.
By the way, exactly what do the deputies do?
I think
with the jury.
I think they monitor their phone calls. They accompany them whenever they take a field trip. They come back and forth to court with them. They just sort of chaperone them all the time.
Okay. Michelle, how does this play in Canada, the O.J. Simpson trial? Is it a major media event as it is here in the lower 48?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
It's on the TV stations and.
But like all day long?
Yeah, all day.
Really?
It's very hard to see any of the tension on the faces of the jurors when you look at them. I mean, we see them file in and out of court every morning, and I think most of them are probably having a pretty reasonable time. I mean, then again, it grows old after 100 days.
Of course it does. Michelle, I'm glad you called, and thank you for watching.
Oh, no problem.
Okay, you're keen too, kid. Bye-bye.
Oh, thanks.
Take
Bye.
care. Bye-bye. How do you cover this story for the New York Times and compete with the tabloids, who play by a set of rules completely different from those that apply to you?
Well, it's a tricky maneuver. I mean, you have to tune out 90% of the stuff that's going on around this case, all this ancillary sort of peripheral stuff, the gossipy things, the toll-free numbers, the unsubstantiated stories. You have to look for whatever themes you consider to be important, whatever is legally or socially important, and you have to be able to put a different kind of spin on the story that people who watch it on television won't pick up.
So how do you do that? The trials...
You do it an awful lot just by instinct, I do it by instinct.
Example.
Well, if you try to analyze how Judge Ito is doing, or what the new Ito amounts to, and whether or not
the new Ito,
the new strict sort of school-marmish disciplinarian Ito, and whether it's going to make a difference really in the trial or not. You just try to take the analysis one step further. That's one thing you try to do, or that I try to do. Another thing is just to spin a yarn, to tell a story. In a funny sort of way. I'm in the same position as a sports writer who goes to a ball game that everybody watches on television. I have to tell the story smarter, more analytically, more colorfully. I try to throw some nice phrases into every story. I sprinkle metaphors in them.
Are there some you could recall that you're very proud of?
Besides that daguerreotype one that I just told you?
That was good.
I worked hard on that.
And I've never heard the word pronounced quite that way. But
I think that's even correct, that pronunciation.
I think it is too, yeah.
I had to look it up in the dictionary, but I think I pronounced it right. Oh, for instance, they passed...
And by the way, for those who are wondering what it is, it was an early form of photography.
Right, where there wasn't a lot of light and the film wasn't terribly sensitive, and you had to sit immobilized forever.
Who was the guy that
Matthew Brady.
Thank you, Civil War,
Brady,
surely.
Yeah. Well, the other day, for instance, they passed around the vial of blood that Dennis Fung had given to Andrea Mazzola purportedly to carry out of the house. And the question was whether or not she would have felt the additional weight of the vial in the plastic bag that she was carrying. And so they passed around the envelope containing the vial, and everybody was going all the jurors were going like this with it. And I said, it was as if they were in a post office and they were trying to determine whether it needed another stamp.
Very good. That's very good. It's a word picture.
Yeah, it's a word picture.
And by the way, everybody understands that.
Right, exactly.
Now, what about all newspapers, all print, competing with broadcast? It's on Channel 5 here in Los Angeles around the clock. It's on KNX News Radio around the clock.
Right.
It's carried for the most part by, I believe, the cable news network.
Right.
So once again, we're watching this ball game all day long.
Yeah, that's very true.
But then again, you see things that we don't see, that the television can't. You see the jurors, we don't.
Look, I'm always looking at them. You have the 360 degrees, and I'm looking at the counsel table. I'm looking at the way people react to things. The camera presents a very narrow slice of things. I'm looking at just the chemistry between all the players, the spectators. the families, you know. I mean, there was a very dramatic scene the other day, which probably wasn't on television, when they introduced the envelope containing the eyeglasses. And I was sitting, you know, next to Tanya Brown, Denise, Nicole's youngest sister. And the moment that Peter Neufeld, the lawyer, said, I'd like to introduce this envelope into evidence, however he put it in more legalistic language, you could see her tighten up. These were her mother's glasses. You know, all of a sudden, you know, people talk about how, like the Proustian rush that you get when you taste something and you get a whole number of associations. It's the same thing when you see or hear about something, and that just conjured up a whole complicated set of emotions for her, and she started to shake and she started to cry. And I described that. Her boyfriend put her arm around her. I don't know if that was on camera, but that to me...
To my knowledge, it wasn't. I don't watch it all the time.
That was another occasion where you wanted to paint a word picture. That was a way of bringing the case back down to its essence again, and that's what I was trying to do.
That's what your newspaper and many others do extremely well. And it's funny, the day after, and I mentioned this here to the folks, I know, just tell them I'm going to be there in just a second. The day after the Oklahoma bombing, while you could see it all happen in the raw on television, in that first rough draft of history, as I call live television, when you picked up the Times, LA or New York or Chicago Tribune the next day, there was the story in your hands,
That's
my
right.
friend.
That's
there was
right.
the story in your hands. David Margolick is my guest. His book is called At the Bar. Stories from that and from you on the toll-free at 800-952-2788 after this break.